you wish. Miss Ben right now is starting that recording. You can drop questions in the chat and also pause at certain points to answer any verbal questions that you have. If you ask a follow-up question that we can't answer immediately, we will make sure to come back and give you an answer in writing. And also, if there's a student-specific question that you have, you can put that question and your contact information in the chat, and an administrator will follow up with you, or you can email Carolyn Cohen at ewstokes.org. Student DC CAPE results were sent home yesterday. If you were a Stokes student last year and you are currently a fourth or fifth grader, so just make sure that you check those backpacks to see if those results are in there. And we are going to send home our beginning of year assessment results by the end of October. And just a quick note, the DC CAPE results, if you look at the student report, which I'll show you in this presentation, you'll note that there's a QR code with it, and it asks for an access code if you scan it. We just got the copy of those access codes, so we'll be sending those home electronically as well in a text message through ParentSquare. So our agenda for today is sharing a little bit about how Stokes is supporting student growth. Reviewing our end of year data from last school year, including attendance, iReady, which is our math assessment, DIBELS, which is our reading assessment, NWA, and DC CAPE. We're going to share how students can support growth. How families can support growth, and we're going to take any questions that you might have. So one of the big things I just kind of wanted to start with is, as you know, we've probably been to these presentations before. You may have been to these presentations before. Before I dive into all of this assessment results, all of these standardized assessment results, one thing that I do want to note is that these are just one way. These kinds of results are just one way that we assess how students are doing and progressing in school at Stokes. They're very important. We know that it's really important for our students to have skills and be able to analyze and share their learning with us. But we also really make sure that we emphasize the wellness of the whole child in our school. And so I just wanted to, make sure that we remember that as we look through these standardized assessment results. They're not the only metric that we want to look at when we're looking at how students are doing. There's a lot of other information that we want to take into account. And our big message today is that Stokes East End showed significant growth in our assessment results this past year. You'll see on the following slides that there's lots of metrics and data that I'm going to share with you. But I wanted to start with some of the reasons why we think Stokes East End shows significant growth. We worked hard to improve our school culture and partnerships with families last year. All of us worked together, including families, to improve student attendance rates last year, and I'll share some data on that. Our staffing was much more stable last year, so we retained more teachers and were able to make sure that students were in classrooms staffed with stable, educated, experienced educators. We also worked really hard on doing a wide-reaching math intervention for students in second through fifth grades last year. We did two types of interventions in math. Some of our students received virtual small group tutoring, and most of our other students received in second through fifth grade Stokes staff small group tutoring for math. We also departmentalized instructional coaching. So our instructional coaches were really targeted towards specific content areas last year, and we think that they really help support their teachers in our teachers in their instruction. We did a lot of professional development for teachers and leaders last year, and we also shifted our teaching model in the second through fifth grades so that math was taught entirely in English last year. As we move through the next several slides on data, I know that a lot of questions are going to come up about, well, what are you doing about this and what are your next steps? And I just want to let you know that at the end of this presentation, towards the end of the presentation, we'll talk a lot more about that, how to kind of build on this good work. The first thing I wanted to share and kind of congratulate families for is we have really improved our attendance rates at East End. And so I included data here from the past 3 school years. In-seat attendance rate is the attendance rate that students are present in their classrooms in their seats. And you can see that in school year 21-22, 89, our in-seat attendance rate was that students were attending 89% of the time. And in 23-24, it was 91.4. And so that may not seem huge, but 2 percentage points is a big jump in an attendance rate. And so thank you so much for sending your children to school more regularly and making sure that they're in seat. And the other big one that I think is even probably more significant when we look at this is the chronic absenteeism rate. Right, coming back from the pandemic, 39% of students at East End were chronically absent, which meant that they were absent for more than 10% of the school year. So that's on average like a day every 2 weeks where they were absent. That rate has reduced to 23%. And so we know that in order to continue this great growth that we've been having, it's really important for families to continue to send their students to school when they're healthy, as often as possible, including making sure that students are there on time in the morning, you know, by 8:15 at the latest, otherwise they're tardy, and also not picking them up early from school, because all of those minutes that students are missing from class are minutes they can't be increasing their learning. So thank you so much for your hard work on this, and also continue that, please. The first assessment that I'm going to talk a little bit about is iReady. This is a math assessment that's administered 3 times a year for kindergarten through 5th grade students. This assessment is adaptive, which means that the test is individualized based on previous answers. So if students are answering a lot of questions correctly, they get a harder test. If they're answering a lot of questions incorrectly, their test gets a little bit easier. It gives information about how students are performing relative to grade level benchmarks. And I include the key here, which explains kind of the color coding that iReady does. Now, so mid or above grade level is green with some lines through it. Early on grade level is green. 1 grade level below is yellow. 2 grade levels below is red, and 3 or more grade levels below has those little red with the lines through them. An important thing to note about iReady is that the benchmark doesn't change through the year. So if students are taking the beginning of year assessment on iReady in 4th grade, if they're scoring 1 grade level below, that means they've mastered 3rd grade content, which is about where they should be for their grade level, right? And so if you get a result from iReady in the beginning of year that says your child is 1 grade level below, remember that this assessment is grading you against end of year standards. And then this is a little bit of information about how you can interpret your students' results. And you should be receiving these again by the end of October. And so you'll see the results that look a little bit like this. And you can take a look at this slide. We'll send out the slide deck with all of the links and everything before. And also there's an iReady Family Center link right here at the bottom of this previous slide. So you can take a look at those when you have some time. This is our iReady data for this past school year 23-24, and the year before. And I just kind of wanted to share some highlights of the data. So on iReady, at the end of the year, between school year 22-23 to 23-24, we had growth from 44% of students being at or above grade level to 49% of students being at or above grade level. So that was a growth of 5 percentage points at the end of the year of students who are on the grade level target for iReady. And then you can also see that the percent of students who made progress towards annual typical growth has also increased significantly this past year. So it went from 70% of our students making their growth targets to 88% of students making their growth targets at East End. Oops. The next assessment I want to share a little bit about is DIBELS. DIBELS is administered also to K through 5, 3 times per year, and it assesses important reading skills. The data that we get out of DIBELS is used by teachers to target these skills during the classroom time and provide guidance for families. We also use it to set realistic and personalized goals for student growth. Again, I've linked here at the bottom Parent Guide to DIBELS, which is a lot of really important information about how to interpret the test information. But you can also take a look at this slide. This is information about what DIBELS measures and which grade levels it assesses. So you can see that your assessment results when you get them home are going to give you metrics on different subtests depending on the grade level that your child is in. And this is what a DIBELS example report looks like. You can see up here at the top, it'll have a composite score and it'll be color coded blue, green, yellow, or red. This student was at a green, which means they have met the goal as a composite. And then you can see the different levels of subtests here, and it explains a little bit what they mean. And the child score is here. This child scored in the blue on these two and the green on this one. And so those are the scores of the individual child there. That's what that looks like. And this is our end of year, this is our data for DIBELS. And I just kind of wanted to share information and orient you a little bit to this assessment. So here you can see that we've been doing DIBELS since 21-22, and BOY stands for beginning of year and EOY stands for end of year. And so you can see the increase in students who are scoring at or above benchmark based on these little green lines that you can kind of track from beginning of year to end of year through the years. The highlight here is that from end of year 22-23, which is here, to end of year 23-24, which is the end of last year, our East End students had growth that 63% of them were in 22-23 were at or above grade level, to the end of the year at 67% at or above grade level. And then I also included, this is our most recent data here. We just closed the test window for DIBELS. And so this is the beginning of year data for this school year. I'm going to pause here and see if anybody has any questions about DIBELS or iReady that they would like to ask. All right. I'm going to keep going. The next assessment data that I'm going to show you is NWA MAP, which is another assessment that is given either 1 or 2 times per year in reading and math K-5. Last year, we just did this assessment K-2, but we found that we really wanted this information for our upper grades as well. So we have decided to do it one time in October for our 3rd through 5th graders. It is a nationally normed assessment, meaning we get a benchmark compared to national averages, which is really helpful for us. And the reports are typically delivered to through Parent Square's secure documents. If you need help accessing those secure documents, there's a link there at the bottom that when you get this slide deck, you can click and get there. Before I dive too much into NWA, I just want to explain again what a percentile versus a quintile is, because it's important information to understand. So a percentile is a value on a scale of 100 that indicates the percent of a distribution that is equal to or below it. So a lot of times as parents, we see percentiles on growth charts. If your child is at the 70th percentile in height, that means that they're doing better than, they're doing better, they're taller than 70% of the students of their same age. Percentiles work the same way in assessment results for NWA. And so you're going to get a score that says this child is at a X percentile, and you know that that child compared to students in that same grade level nationwide, that's how that child scored. So if my child scored at the 40th percentile, and they were a 2nd grader for the beginning of the year, that means that they scored better than 40% of 2nd graders nationwide. The average, so like if it's a typical school or child, they're scoring at the 50th percentile. So that would mean like that it's average. And NWA also uses quintiles. They divide it into 5 sections of percentiles, and so you can see the division here in the quintiles. You'll see these on your reports. So it's 5 equal groups of the percentiles, and you can see these, and I'll show you in a second what that looks like on your reports. So this is a sample NWA progress report. You can tell the term or the year here. The most recent exam they will include at the top. This is the RIT score, which is the score on the assessment, but what you really want to look at is the percentile range. And so this child in math scored at the 87th percentile in the winter of 2022, meaning that that child, when they were in fourth grade, scored better than 87% of fourth graders. And then you'll see here, it divides the areas into the different goals. So operations, measurement and data, number and operations, and geometry. And you can see that you see a quintile score here. So in all of the areas, this child was at a high, except for measurement and data where they're in the high average score. So this can give you a good sense of their strengths and areas of growth as well. And then this is our assessment overview for NWEA for last year's East End students, K to second. So overall, in English language arts and reading, our students in K to second in the spring scored at the 58th percentile, meaning that they scored better than 58% of students nationwide. So we're scoring a little bit above national averages on NWEA K to 2. And you can see these grade level achievement percentiles as well. And you can also see the breakdowns of the grades in their quintiles. Any questions on this? This is that same view for math. So overall, students scored at the 52nd percentile, meaning a little better than national averages. And this is the percentiles per grade level. Yep. We are going to do the DC CAPE compared to other DC schools data in just a few minutes. Absolutely. Actually, right now. So DC CAPE, which is DC's standardized, mandated standardized assessment for all public school students, third through fifth grade for elementary students, they take reading and math, and fifth graders also take science exams. This was formerly called PARCC. But OSSE, the state superintendent, claims that it's a very comparable assessment, and the test question types and the way that it's scored is the same. So I trust that it's comparable to previous years. It tests students' attainment of grade level standards. Meaning, so it's not an adaptive test like iReady, so it's not going to get easier or harder depending on how you answer it. It tests basically grade level standards for that grade. It is a timed test for general education students, meaning students have a certain amount of time that they're allowed to spend on this test, and they're not allowed to have extra time unless they have special accommodations for instance, if they're English language learners or if they have a disability that requires extended time. So that differs very significantly from most of the other assessments that we do. Most of those are not timed. I've included a link here at the bottom from OSSE's page to explain a little bit more about DC CAPE, and you can find a lot of resources there that are really interesting if you want to go deeper. DC's DC CAPE's performance levels, they're scored on a 1 through 5 scale. You can see the descriptors here. 1 is that they did not yet meet expectations. 2 is that they partially met expectations. 3 is that they approached expectations. And 4 and 5 meant that they met grade level expectations or exceeded them. It's important for us to look at both 4s and 5s and also 3s, 4s, and 5s. DC includes both of them in their DC report card because typically students who score at a level 3 have the basic skills required of their grade level, meaning they can function decently, they can function at grade level in English language arts or math. What differentiates students that score a 3 and a 4 is typically those higher order thinking skills, those analysis skills. Are they able to apply the knowledge that they have to unique situations and really analyze and go deeper in those subject areas? Let me just stop my share really quick. I'm going to pull up a little document to share with you. Sorry. So in your you should have received this parent or guiding guide to your students' score reports in DC CAPE. And so I just wanted to share with you a little bit about what it looks like so that you have a sense. So these are the 4 performance levels that we discussed. And then also that's that little QR code up at the top that gives you a link to some more information about DC CAPE for families. Again, that requires an access code, which we'll be sending home probably tomorrow to make sure that you can access that QR code. But really, it's basically an electronic version of this score report. So it's not too different from what you see on your printed score report. So you see their performance level, and then you also see all of the subclaims here. So you can read more information about what each of those subclaims means at the grade level and whether or not the child met the expectations for that particular subclaim. And it also gives you a sense of how your child compares to DC and also Stokes students in general. So again, you should have received those DC CAPE scores in backpack. So if your child was a 3rd or 4th grader last year at Stokes and is a 4th or 5th grader this year at Stokes, you should have received those score reports in backpacks. So make sure you check that. Seeing a couple of questions here. So is it typical for NWA and CAPE to differ from each other? And is this test the same for every school? Yep. So all of the tests, are basically the same for every school. Not all of the questions are exactly the same. DC CAPE will give, not everybody gets the exact same set of questions, but it's randomized and theoretically it's comparable across schools. And NWA and DC CAPE, is it typical for NWA and DC CAPE to differ? It is pretty typical for NWA and DC CAPE to differ. DC CAPE is a very challenging assessment. It requires students to write essays, to analyze, to model, to apply their learning. NWA is a little bit more skill focused. And so students typically do better on NWA than they do on DC CAPE. And if you're scoring, what most of the comparable studies have shown between NWA and DC CAPE is that if your child is scoring around the 75th percentile on a NWA exam, then typically they will score at grade level on CAPE. So that means that if your child is scoring at the 75th percentile, they're doing better than 75% of the other comparable students nationwide. And that means that they'll probably score 4 or 5 on DC CAPE is about the typical comparability. I'm going to share a little bit about how our East End students are growing. And so this graph is the 4+ graph, meaning if students were scoring at 4 or above, so meeting expectations or above longitudinally. I included DC's general data here. So the lighter colors are DC's in general, and the darker colors are that same content area, but Stokes East End. Between 23 and 24, the number of students scoring 4+ increased 5.4% in ELA and 3.5 percentage points in math from the previous year, whereas DC in general had less than a 1% increase overall. And so our growth is outpacing DC's in general, but we are still scoring lower than DC's students in general, and we definitely still have work to do there. That same graph, but instead of 4+, it's 3+. So this includes students who are approaching expectations and above. Remember, I said that students who are approaching expectations typically have the basic skills required of that grade level, but maybe need a little bit more work with analysis and higher order thinking skills and analyzing and comparing and all of those sort of more challenging skills. And some really great news here. And thank you so much to all of the folks, the families and staff at East End. Stokes East End had the 8th most growth for 3+ in math out of all of the DC's 221 schools. And so that's really good news. It shows that the hard work that we put in and the sacrifices that we made for the other pieces of our day really paid off in getting our East End students those basic skills. And then I just wanted to share a little bit about the performance levels, and we'll look at these in a couple of different ways on DC Cape. The LEA, which means both Stokes, Brookland, and East End together. This was our performance level. Remember that 5 is exceeding expectations, and 4 is meeting expectations, and that 3 is approaching expectations. So you can see that across the LEA, 7.3% were exceeding expectations, and 32.1 were meeting expectations in English language arts. This purple line is where DC students in general were scoring. And so if the purple line is below the green line, that means that particular metric is we did better than DC in general. And if the purple line is above the green line, that means that we still have work to do to meet the DC level. And that's that same graph, but for math. And I just wanted to share sort of the detailed scores overall. This was all of East End students, and this is by grade level, so 3rd, 4th, and 5th. And I'll give you guys a moment to look at that. And these are our subgroup data for performance levels for subgroups. I only was able to include, in order to protect student privacy, I can't share data that has less than 10 students in a subgroup. And so there are subgroups that we have represented at East End with less than 10 tested students in them that I can't share here. But this is the data for East End subgroups in math in general. So our African-American students, and that's that purple line here. So our African-American students, Black students scored better than DC's students and BC's African-American students in general. DC does not publish information for students who are 2 or more races, so I don't have a DC comparison there. Our special education students scored at about the same rate as DC students in general in math, and our economically disadvantaged students scored a little bit lower. And that's that same data for English language arts. Okay. And this is one of my favorite graphs. It's a little bit hard to explain, but I think it's really interesting. So bear with me. So what I did was I took a look at students who had scores for 2 consecutive years at East End. And so those would be students who had a 3rd grade score and a 4th grade score, or a 4th grade score and a 5th grade score. So if they had 2 scores, I was able to compare their data and look at how their performance levels changed. And so basically, if you were a 3rd grader and you scored at a level 3, and then in 4th grade, you also scored at a level 3, that means you didn't have any performance level change. So your number would be 0. If you went up 1 performance level, meaning you went from a level 2 to a level 3 or a level 3 to a level 4, that's a 1. And if you had 2 performance level increases, so from a 3 to a 5 or a 2 to a 4, and that's a 2. And then if you decreased a performance level, that's a -1. So if you went from a 3 to a 2 or a 4 to a 3, and then if you decrease 2, that's a -2. And so I just wanted to share with you this graph because I think it's interesting, and I think it shows that we definitely still have work to do at East End to improve our students' academic outcomes, but we are heading in the right direction. This is the prior year's 3rd to 4th graders in 2023. So this was 2 years ago. This was the data that we can see. So about 57% of our students stayed at the same level, and about 3.5% of them increased a level in math. But almost 40% of them decreased to performance level. Whereas the previous year, only 10% of students decreased a performance level, and 90% of students stayed at the same performance level or increased in math. And this is similarly for English language arts as well. So we're trending, where our growth is getting better, and we are really improving our scores here. So in terms of what's next, Ms. Hope, I think, was going to talk through some of these things for us.
Yes, yes. Good evening, everyone. What's next, right? So as we have here before you, right? And Julie shared, we are trending in the right direction, right? And so we want to keep up with that. So a few things that we are going to do differently to support that is definitely starting interventions earlier. We actually are in the process of finalizing details and logistics for our math intervention. Last year, we started our math intervention the end of January, February. And so this year we want, because we felt like we had success, we definitely wanted to start it earlier. And so the plan is to start it towards the end of first trimester, beginning of second trimester. Okay. And then we've also had a chance to, we've already started our interventions, our varsity interventions this week. So, okay. We've also hired additional leaders here at Easton this year to help support with behavior. We have a dean of students. We also have a special services coordinator, and that includes not just SPED, but our ELL population as well too. And this year we have a SSC coordinator specifically at Easton. So that has been definitely a great advantage. And then we have also included, we've hired an additional instructional coach. So we have a math coach, a literacy coach, and then also a target language coach. We have restructured our grade level team meetings. We've actually rebranded. They are called professional learning experiences, and that is to definitely improve collaboration amongst the team. We've had also it gives our coaches a chance to model collaboration for our team members as well. And we are also, as an LEA, actually, we've started data meetings. And we actually just had our first one at Easton. It was last week. And we are using that time together to be able to review data and to be able to review data once a month. And then for us to be able to reflect and see what can we do to keep us moving forward and to grow. We are also, our mission, our LEA mission this year is to definitely lead in with love. So definitely to continue to build on staff morale, school morale, school culture in general. And we're going to continue to have professional development for teachers and leaders, which gives opportunity for observations and feedback. We are also planning to adopt a new ELA curriculum. That's something that we've been, preparing for a while. And then lastly, we are going to have increased academic partnering with families. So we've had a success. Hold on for a minute. Increased academic partnering with families. So we had a success last year with science night. We packed out the cafeteria. So we were planning to continue with science night and then add a math and literacy night this year. So please stay tuned for details around that.
Perfect. So thank you so much, Ms. Hope, for sharing all that. Appreciate your hard work. And so some of the ways that families can support at home to continue this growth that we're seeing with our East End students is make sure that when you receive your family assessment reports that you review them. They should be coming again by the end of October. And take a look at how your child is doing on those reports. And if you have any questions or concerns, make sure you talk to your teacher during parent-teacher conferences, and they'll give you some suggestions about what you can do to support your child at home. The assessment reports, Dibbles also has some really good, like easy activities that you can use right on that assessment report. We also have some more online tutoring platforms. So you should have received your Clever Access IDs through Parent Square in the secure documents section. So you may go and access these platforms at home and use them for some additional practice when you'd like to. So there's Varsity Tutors, which is a tutoring platform, which has a lot of really interesting content on there. We're just sort of beginning to get our feet wet with it. We're using it for small group tutoring, but there's also a lot of free resources on there that help that could help your students or even you. There's like conversational French in there and all sorts of things in the Varsity Tutors platform that are accessible for free now that we have a partnership with them. There's also online platforms like Dreambox Math and Amplify Boost for reading in there. And so if you'd like to give your child a little more practice with their math skills or with their reading skills, please feel free to use those and you can just log in through Clever and do that. Continue to please work on that attendance. So, send your child to school when they're healthy every day. Make sure that you're sending them, on time the best you can, and please don't pick up your child early. We have our last section of the day for our upper grades is math, and so half of the time they'll be in math at the end of the school day. And so if you are picking your child up at 3 o'clock, they're missing 25 minutes of math instruction when that happens. And we really want to avoid that as much as possible because those minutes really add up. Make sure you're doing those recommendations that your child's parent sends you during parent-teacher conferences and, read with your child as much as possible. So now is a time for questions. You can go ahead and take a little view of a little snap of this QR code if you could. I really appreciate your feedback on the meeting, but I'm happy to answer questions. I'll put that up again at the end. So I'm going to stop my share now so we can all kind of look at each other if you'd like to. So feel free to unmute yourself, or if there's anything in the chat that I need to get to. Let's see. All right. What grades are eligible for math intervention? So right now we're starting our focus with our 4th and 5th graders right now, but we are expanding our math intervention program down through the lower grades in a couple of months. Is that right? Is that accurate, Ms. Hope?
Yes, that's correct.
Great. And what intervention has started already? So we've already started our varsity tutor intervention, which is it's students who we identified need additional support, who don't already have identified supports necessary. So some of those students in the upper grades as well have started interventions with the Varsity Tutor platform, which is an online small group tutoring. So students are doing it during the school day, hold in small groups, but it's an online tutor through the Varsity Tutors platform. So they'll be working on reading. Any writing interventions or apps? Any writing interventions or apps? So there are, if we use Amplify Boost online, it'll help us with some of our English language arts skills, which will definitely build those writing skills. Any questions I can answer? You feel free to unmute yourself and just ask them out loud if you'd like to. Okay, are writing assessments written or typed? So the writing assessment in DC CAPE is typed. So students are using their Chromebooks with regularity through the school year. We don't give them explicit instruction in typing, but we do integrate it throughout the school year in the activities that they do and the projects that they do on their computers. And then I see here, I realize the students who are at level or exceeding represent a minority, but are there opportunities to challenge them in new ways? Absolutely. It's important for us to differentiate instruction with consistency through all of the levels. And so our curriculums that we use definitely have those opportunities present in them, and students, are exposed to high order thinking skills for sure. Okay, I see a couple of raised hands. I'll take Nikki first.
Yeah, hi. I have a kindergartner, and I just watched him or heard about him taking the iReady test for the first time on a computer, which is a totally new experience for him, and which just raises some questions in my head. Like overall, presumably these different tests have different formats. Like how do you assess whether kids are really understanding the material being tested versus understanding like how to take that particular test or utilize that particular platform?
Absolutely. It's a great question, Nikki. And it's something that as elementary educators, it's definitely something we consider. You know, we do like give our students some instruction about how to use the different online platforms in order to take the test, but you'll see that it does often take them a few times to really get comfortable with the platforms, especially when they're that young. And so this is one of the really important reasons why it's important to not only look at our standardized test results, when we're talking about a student's progress, but also talk to the teacher and look at the work that they're doing in class to make sure that, those two things align. Because as an early childhood educator, as I began my career, you'll definitely see students who are more capable than they show on standardized assessments because of those formats. And so it's important to take these assessment results with a grain of salt, to look at them and consider them and make sure that it aligns with the kind of work that you're seeing your student produce outside of this format.
Thank
Does
you.
that help?
Yeah, thanks.
Martine, I see you have your hand raised.
Hey, good afternoon.
How are you doing?
I'm doing well, thank you. So I don't know if mine's more of a question than a comment. So one, I do recognize, how these numbers have been increasing and appreciate, the work that you guys have been doing with the students. However, for me personally, when I was looking at my child's test scores, she did pretty well, and I'm pretty happy with her scores. However, when it came to the math section, I saw that the little bar, it kind of breaks it down for each concept. When it came to multiplication and division, she scored lower than I expected on that because and lower than I expected because this summer I was working with her with multiplication and division, and she's learning it and she knows it. So in my mind, it led me to think, okay, she wasn't learning that in third grade, and looking at homework, I didn't see her learning much of multiplication and division. So I just feel like she could have scored better if she was more prepared for that. So I just don't understand what's that disconnect. And then number two, I hear you guys when you're saying that attendance, picking up children early from school, it kind of, interferes in their learning and, eventually test taking and whatnot. But the one thing I don't hear that I feel like is a big issue that still an issue is the behavior issues that are going on in the school. And I feel that that adds into their learning experience because I'm hearing every day about a fight or about them getting in trouble. So I often try to imagine what the school day looks like. And, volunteering, I can see how, their chatterboxes full of energy all over the place. And I found it hard for me myself to get them calm enough to relay whatever message I have to them and for them to actually listen to the message, not just hear it. So those are my two statements.
Thanks so much for sharing. Those are both really important things. We are aware that our students, it's one of the areas of focus for us in our math instruction is making sure that we're increasing students' math multiplication and division fluency. One of the ways that our math curriculum does that, like works on multiplication and division fluency, is through some of the games that they use in the classroom. And so I would encourage you, and I can we can share more of those games at home. I'm sure that the teachers probably do that during parent-teacher conferences and things like that. But playing those multiplication and division fluency games at home would definitely help with that. And we know that it's an area that we need to focus on as well in the classroom. So thanks for bringing that up. And as well, behavior management is definitely, if students aren't, the behavior isn't good enough, then they aren't going to be able to get as much out of the teaching, right? And so that's one of the reasons that we hired a dean of students this year at East End, is to continue to work on those behavior management strategies that teachers are using and also support students with those issues. I don't know if you have anything else you'd like to add to that.
Sorry,
No, I just, I mean, I'm just gonna, I mean, I know we have a job to do too, as well at home. So I'm just gonna continue, working with her, um, so that I can see it increase. But like I said, um, it's just, I don't know, just that part, the multiplication and division. I just feel that, maybe she wasn't set up to be able to master that.
Yeah, for sure. I totally, yeah. It's definitely an area that we know we need to continue to work on as an emphasis for our math instruction is building that fluency, both in addition to subtraction, but also multiplication. I'm gonna grab a thing really quick that I'm gonna show you guys. I think it's really helpful. Um, I use this board game with my kiddo a lot. It's called Prime Climb, and it's a multiplication and division board game. It's really, really fun. It would be most appropriate probably for like third graders who are pretty advanced or fourth or fifth graders. But it's a really good way to continue to build multiplication fluency and division fluency at home, in a fun way. It's called
Okay,
Prime
thank
Climb.
you.
Hope, I don't know if you had anything else to add about the behavior management or.
Yeah, sorry, I just was too slow with unmuting. My apologies.
Okay.
But yes, no, just in addition to what Julia said, as far as like hiring an additional admin, our dean of students, right? We also this year also are continuing to support teachers, right, with behavior management and looking into additional professional development around that, right? We've also had a chance to in SPDI this year have our staff trained in the second level of responsive classroom. So and also restorative practices as well. So yes, thank you for that feedback.
Burish, I don't know your first.
Hi, I'm Heather.
How are you doing?
Good, Burris, H for Heather. Good, thank you. Thank you again for the presentation. I guess I do want to echo what Martine said. The multiplication and division strategies. So my child I'm preparing her for middle school as well with different school applications. Even now, she was in a test prep program this summer to do an independent school application. When I tell you we were on the struggle bus to do division and multiplication this summer, I was like, how are you guys like not, understanding this, or where are you trying to understand where she was to be ready to take that test? Because it was a middle school readiness test. And I was very frustrated as a parent trying to teach her things that I thought she would have already known or been familiar with. So we got over that hump. We did some different levels of support and tutoring. But my question is, like, now she's getting homework that I find very challenging to help with because the strategies are just so different. Like, I just want to teach her the way that I learned it, and I can't. And she's not allowed to do that, or she has to show it this way. And I'm like, where was the parent lesson on how to help us help them? Because to me, there's too much information. Like, why are you giving us all of these pictures for multiplication when it doesn't have to be that difficult? I don't know if this is common core standards, but like there's way more information in this problem that's necessary to solve it, in my opinion. And so I get frustrated, then I frustrate her. And it's been a very challenging September. She finally took her test in September 30th on Monday. But I'm just like, what can you guys do to help us help them at home to make sure that our styles are the same in delivery? Because like, to Martine's point, if you think your child's understanding that, but then how we're doing it might be different from what the classroom is doing it, then we're just butting heads and it's going to lead to more confusion on their part.
That makes sense. Yeah, that makes sense. Thanks so much for that comment. And I totally get where you're coming from. It can be really, really frustrating to not know how to support your child in the ways that, in an alignment with the curriculum. Kind of two things that I want to share with you. The first thing is that, despite the fact that it feels different and uncomfortable, the way that we're teaching math through our curriculum really builds a deep level of conceptual understanding. And if we can support students enough to master it, we'll really set them up well for later math. And so I'm happy to share more about it at another time. But we all feel very strongly about the philosophy and the approach to teaching that. But let me just share with you a resource that I think will be really helpful. Miss Juan Maribel just dropped this in the chat. These two links in the chat. These are the games and math words and strategies that we use in our math curriculum. And so you can find here the math games that we use in our curriculum. And so if you wanted to look at a grade, if your child is your child fourth grade or yeah. And so you can look at all the fourth grade games here and you can kind of figure out, which ones might be useful for her to practice with. And then this, I think, is maybe going to be the most helpful thing for this issue that you're talking about. So if I go to fourth grade, this is the math words and ideas. You can take a look at the strategies and the help. This will give you some help about like the types of ways that we are teaching. So if we wanted to say multiplication and division facts, learning multiplication facts. So you can click on these links to learn more about multiplication facts and the ways that they're taught in our curriculum. And so if we're looking at by 10 and by 5 facts, you can take a look at the strategy that we teach in our curriculum. So I think that this might, if you want to take a little bit of time to explore this, I think it would be really useful to kind of give you some context there. I know that it feels like it maybe takes longer, but it really is building the ways that we're teaching math is really building understanding of the place value system and base 10 understandings in the ways that how we were taught as children didn't necessarily do. And so I know that it feels challenging, but I think we feel strongly that it is useful for students to learn these kinds of strategies as well. And they will eventually get to the point where they learn the traditional algorithm that we learned. But first, we build that conceptual understanding. I hope that helps, but it's really worth exploring those strategies. Thanks for the question. Any other questions I can answer right now? I hope you all have a lovely rest of your evening and a wonderful rest of your week.
When you guys send the recording, can you just make sure that the links are in the same message too? Thank you.
Absolutely. Oh, the iReady. Yes, so we don't use the iReady instructional piece, but we do have Dreambox for math and Amplify Boost for reading that are accessible through Clever, which will give a lot of that same support that the iReady does. Mike, I hope that helps. Are you familiar about how to get into those? Okay. Perfect. All right. Thank you so much.